Disruption, change, and uncertainty have become an inextricable part of our vocabulary over the last few months. If you want to find out how we can thrive in an environment of uncertainty, then stay around. When we come back, we talk to Dr. Paige Williams about her book, Becoming AntiFragile, Learning to Thrive Through Disruption, Challenge, and Change. If you're just joining us, then welcome to the Writers' Corner live show. This is episode 100. I'm your host, Bridgetti.Live from Cape Town in South Africa. The stream is made possible by StreamYard and Creative Edge. To know when we go live, please go ahead and like our Facebook page so you get a notification. And on YouTube, please click the subscribe button and the notification bell. Today's show, we talk to Dr. Paige Williams about her book, Becoming AntiFragile, Learning to Thrive Through Disruption, Challenge, and Change. And so let's welcome Dr. Paige Williams to the show.
Hi
Paige,
there.
welcome to the show.
Oh, lovely. It's lovely to be here. And the 100th edition, I can't believe it. It feels very special to be joining you.
Welcome, absolutely. Paige, in this uncertain times that we live with, your book is so necessary for many, many reasons. Did you write this book specifically for this time? Was that just pure coincidence?
Well, it was pure coincidence. I started writing the book in the middle of last year, actually, and so I've been working in the space of positive psychology and systems and neuroscience, and I actually came across the idea of AntiFragile in a book I was reading by Mark Manson, his famous book about hope, and he talks about AntiFragile in that book. And he suggests that every choice we make either moves us towards fragility or anti-fragility. And I hadn't heard the word before, and I was intrigued by it. And then I went back and read the original piece, which is a kind of an economic and political systems piece written by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And I got even more intrigued by the idea, but through this lens of what would it mean for people and human systems to be anti-fragile, and particularly with my lens working in organizations and with leaders, what's the possibility if leaders can become anti-fragile, not just for themselves, but for the teams and organizations that they lead?
So tell us a little bit in terms of the business world. How do you define being anti-fragile?
Well, the definition of anti-fragile, we can actually go back to Taleb's original work. And the way it's defined is anything that gains more than it loses through disruption, challenge, and change, or disruption and uncertainty. So what do we mean by that? Well, it means that when we're in these environments and circumstances where we need to let go of control, where we need to accept that actually there are things that are going to happen in this context that we aren't going to be able to plan for, then in those kind of environments, we actually come out in some way better than we went into them. So we improve through that disruption, challenge, and change, rather than it making us kind of either break under the pressure or the anxiety, or play so small and safe that we can't actually take advantage of opportunities that may be right there in front of us. So in essence, anti-fragility is when we get more upside than downside from a disruptive and uncertain environment. And that's as true in business as it is in our personal lives, as it is in kind of the economic and political arena that the idea was first conceived in.
Do you think that COVID-19 has exposed how fragile or not we are in the business sector?
Oh, I think that COVID-19 has exposed all kinds of fragilities that have been building for decades. When I first started writing the book in the middle of last year, I started calling this new decade that we were about to enter the decade of disruption. And there was kind of this perfect storm, and not just in the business world, but certainly impacting the business world in terms of what was happening with our social structures, what was happening in terms of the pace of change, of technology advancement. And really, we can sum it up with work that Ken Wilber talks about in terms of our internal and our external worlds. And the gap between our internal world in terms of our capacity to process information, our capacity to make meaning from it, and our psychological health, that and the gap between that and our external world in terms of the complexity and the pace of what's going on outside, that gap was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That's at an individual level. And then collectively, when you think about things like the mental health issues across all ages and stages of population, when we look at things like the disparate the distance between, if we like to put it bluntly, haves and have-nots, that stretching in terms of the polarities in society. If we look at what's happened in major economic systems and the stagnant growth around kind of innovation and creativity, really since World War II, we've kind of had the same model that emerged from World War II, and yet here we are in a very, very different context, politically, economically, socially, in terms of technology and innovation. So there were lots of fragilities that were kind of beneath the surface, and COVID has arrived and smashed the surface open and laid them bare. And that's really what we're experiencing now, is the struggle of those fragilities that have been building, I believe, for decades.
Are there things that companies can do to change where they are at? If their fragility has been exposed, are there ways they can turn it around, do you think?
So I think that in terms of, one of the things that I talk about in the book is the first step in this is recognizing what's making us fragile, because quite often we are creating our own fragility. And certainly this book, Becoming AntiFragile, is very much, let's look in the mirror first, let's do our own work, and then we can help others perhaps understand how they're making themselves fragile. And then as leaders in our own lives and communities and business organizations, we can help perhaps see how the system is making us fragile and make adjustments there as well. So there are certainly ways that organizations can start to recognize how are we making ourselves fragile. One of the things that I talk to a lot about with the leaders that I work with and that I coach is how much diversity is there in the perspectives in your company or in your team. We've heard, I'm sure, the term groupthink. And that's something that can make us fragile, because we end up then only getting a very narrow set of perspectives around a particular challenge or opportunity. And because that is narrow, it means that when something unexpected comes in, we kind of go, well, where did that come from? We didn't even think of that. And that's perhaps because there weren't enough perspectives in the room. So one way that organizations, and I found this is a very tangible way to talk with leaders about it, is, are you getting a broad enough set of perspectives in the room so that actually the options that you're looking at you have more of them to choose from, and they have a broader width in terms of being able to perhaps respond to or preempt uncertainty and disruption, because the reality is we know that's coming. I mean, that's an inherent part of the complexity that we've created for ourselves in the modern world. And so we need to kind of stop pretending that that's not going to happen. Now we need to let go of the idea that we can control and plan our ways out of everything, and perhaps loosen the idea of control a bit and give ourselves more options to be able to, I'm sure we're sick of this word, but pivot and adapt as the change comes about.
Yeah, no, that's kind of become a buzzword these days, pivot. And so one of the authors we had on the show a couple of weeks ago sort of coined the phrase, we need to pivot with purpose.
That's right. Otherwise, we just end up spinning like a ballerina, right? We're just pirouetting rather than pivoting and spinning on the spot. I agree completely.
Absolutely. So who did you write the book in mind with? Was there a particular sector that your book is aimed at?
Yes. So as you know, Bridgetti, this is my first book. And so as I was sitting down to write it, I was encouraged to think of someone that who needs this book right now. And so the person I had in mind was a CEO that I'm working with. I'm working with him in his senior leadership team. And there was, at the time that I started writing the book, there was real kind of dysfunction. This was before the COVID overlay. There was dysfunction in the team. There was silo thinking. It was quite narrow thinking. There wasn't enough psychological safety for people to be able to challenge and innovate. And so everything was getting pretty kind of stuck in a quite dysfunctional way. And that was then flowing out to the rest of the organization. And so I wrote it with that CEO in mind, but also knowing that as I coached other leaders, whether they were the CEO or they were part of that senior leadership team, these were dynamics that were existing, that were being replicated in boardrooms around Australia and no doubt around the world. And really it was about, how do we break that? How do we crack open that dynamic? And how is it that we can engage senior leaders to do the work, but in a way that makes sense to them? And that's what I really liked about this idea of AntiFragile was, I've been involved in positive psychology and teaching the science of well-being for longer than I care to think now. But we often talk about resilience. And I know that there is the great evidence behind resilience, but I also see in my applied work, as I work with organizations and CEOs and their teams, that resilience isn't enough anymore. We need something that moves us beyond just bouncing back. And one of the questions I often get is, well, what's the difference, Paige? What's the difference between resilience and anti-fragile? Isn't it just resilience by another name? And it really isn't, because resilience is about bouncing back to where we were before. So it's about kind of being able to take the knock and then bounce back. And when I've been teaching resilience, I've often used the metaphor of a tennis ball and being able to, come back and perhaps get a bit beyond where you were before. And the thing I've kind of always questioned about that is, that's a lot of energy to be putting into bouncing back and not necessarily moving forward in any way. And that's what I particularly liked about Anti-Fragile, was there's a very intentional, purposeful, active process in becoming anti-fragile that isn't about denying that there's discomfort involved. There isn't about denying that there is struggle involved in this, but it's understanding that struggle and thriving can sometimes go hand in hand, and that even in the struggle, we're able to see where's the learning opportunity in this and actually move to constructive action, rather than kind of getting stuck in the struggle cycle. Perhaps actually able to break that and move ourselves forward in some way.
So do you do coaching? Do you work with people sort of on a one-on-one basis? And do you focus on people only in Australia, or do you do this worldwide? And is your book applicable anywhere in the world?
Yes. So let's say the principles that underpin becoming anti-fragile, and there are 6 of them, are based in human functioning and human psychology and neuroscience. So they're applicable around the world. And deliberately so, because whilst the flavor of complexity may change, the particular details of the nature of disruption or challenge or uncertainty that people are experiencing may differ. There are some broad principles, and that's why I've developed them as such, that can be applied no matter what the flavor of disruption is that you're experiencing. And I've used principles deliberately because we need these heuristics rather than rules, because the context is changing around us. And so if we have a rule that kind of works in this context, but then this context changes, then this rule no longer becomes relevant. Whereas these guiding heuristics can help us, even if the the challenge that we're facing is in our personal life. Maybe, oh, we're having our first baby, or maybe we're moving house, or maybe it's a new boss at work, or we're taking on a new project. They each have a different flavor of complexity and challenge, but there's still complexity and challenge in each of those environments. So I do some one-on-one work with the senior leaders. I generally work more with senior leadership teams, and that's because I'm particularly passionate about the role of leaders in any system. And so whether that's a business organization, or whether it's parents in a family, but that role of leaders in both consuming and creating culture, because leaders play such an important role in giving signals about what's important around here, and in role modeling behavior, and in setting up the processes and systems that any organization or system works by. And so because of that, I believe that that's the best kind of leverage point that we have in any system to create anti-fragility, because if we have leaders who understand these principles and who can role model anti-fragile energy, attitude, and mindsets, which is one of the aspects that I talk about in the book, then they will start, without even realizing it, creating anti-fragile ripples out from themselves through the questions that they ask, and the agenda items, or the way they discuss things in meetings, and the systems that they tweak, because they recognize that actually that system is making us fragile. We just need to adjust it in this way, and it will stop doing that. And that can be a huge first step for organizations and teams to take, and it comes from leaders.
So that is sort of a discovery process that you have to go through to determine where you are at. Does your book guide people through that discovery process?
So alongside the book, I've actually developed a survey called the AntiFragile Survey, and people can take that. You can take that at www.theantifragilesurvey.com, and that takes less than 10 minutes. And at the end of 10 minutes, you'll have a personalized report, which will give you an indication of where you are on a continuum from fragile through to robust, or what we might call resilient, through to anti-fragile, and give you a sense of where you are in terms of your anti-fragility or fragility in relation to the level of uncertainty and disruption you're experiencing. And then it also gives you insight into of these 6 principles, which I've used the acronym ROBUST for, so ROBUST, of the 6 principles. Which one are you using the most? So which one could you continue to kind of leverage to build your anti-fragility? And which one are you using the least? So where is there most headroom for you to kind of have an opportunity to grow? And then it also gives you some insights into your levels of anti-fragile energy, attitudes, and mindsets, and how that's impacting your job satisfaction, your life satisfaction, and other outcomes that make a difference in kind of our quality of life.
So where can people take the survey? Is it only in the book? Is it available apart from the book?
Yeah, so it's a free survey. You can go and take it right now. It's at www.theantifragilesurvey.com, and you'll get your own personalized report that looks a little bit like this. And it's there's about 14 pages there, and it gives you your results and also some tips about how you might start your own anti-fragile journey based on the results of the report. So really, this is about, at this time, as we're experiencing, as you say, Bridgetti, this overwhelming uncertainty and disruption in the world. This is really about, how can I be of service? How can this work be of service to people, and help them understand what they can do for themselves to help, firstly, perhaps remove fragility, and then start moving towards robustness, and then beyond that to becoming anti-fragile. So it's free, available now, takes you less than 10 minutes.
Oh, wow, just a 10-minute survey. That is awesome.
Yeah, well, I hope it helps. I hope it helps people perhaps start to see things, possibilities, that they're there, and action that they can start taking today if they choose to.
Your book, is it, you wrote it specifically for CEOs, but you think there's other other people in the business community that could benefit from reading this book?
Absolutely. I mean, that was very much, my book coach told me, now, Paige, you need an avatar on the wall so that every time that you get fed up with writing the book, you look at your avatar, which was this CEO, and you think, okay, I'm going to stick with this because that person needs it. So this is applicable to anyone at any level in an organization who would like to understand a bit more about how is it that I can actually learn some principles that will serve me beyond what's going on right here, right now, but actually if I use them in an ongoing way, will help me learn through struggle, and will help me deal with struggle more constructively. Some people have asked me, so how do you do it, Paige? What difference has it made to you? And the way I describe it is, so it's not that I don't feel the struggle. Here's the struggle point, and it's not that it's any less uncomfortable for me. It's not that I kind of breeze through struggle and don't feel it now. I certainly do. And let's say here's the point at which I'm able to see either what the learning is or what's the constructive action I can move forward from. Let's imagine the gap used to be this big between me feeling the struggle and being able to get this perspective and move to action. I feel now the gap is like this. So it's not that I don't feel the struggle, I do, but I'm more quickly able to go, okay, am I creating this struggle myself? Is there learning I can take from this struggle? And how do I move forward in some way so that I move not away from the struggle, but I'm moving forward perhaps with the struggle, and not trying to deny it, but moving forward and learning from it. And so that's what I hope anyone can take from this book. And I use a range of examples in it, some of which relate purely to kind of being in a work organization, some of which relate more to home stuff. And there are a series of characters that we follow through as well. And they talk to different aspects of AntiFragile, depending on whether you're perhaps a middle manager, or you're a senior leader, or you're the partner of someone who's working really hard and trying really hard and trying to juggle family commitments as well. So it's a book, it's deliberately a book that can be applied across both professional and personal contexts.
I like that, so that it has a much broader audience. Something that I thought is very interesting at this time is that COVID has exposed the way that, whether our management style has been good or not. And something I've been thinking about a lot is how it's affecting the middle management sector, because all over the world, you had that middle management sector that was used to sort of crack the whip, because there was this distrust from top management, not trusting the workforce to actually get the job done. And so middle management was essentially there to manage the workers. And COVID now has exposed the fact that we possibly don't need such a huge layer of middle management, because we've now seen in a practical way with COVID-19 overnight, with people suddenly moving online, that we can thrive without somebody cracking the whip. So it's going to be interesting to see how that layer of management is going to evolve maybe into something different, other than what it was initially planned for.
And wouldn't it be wonderful if that whole layer of management became a layer of coaches instead? And this is one of the things that I talk about in the book, is actually this idea of fanning the flames and following the energy. And that's inherently what a coaching style of leadership is about, is actually asking and inquiring, what have we got energy for here? And how is it that I can remove obstacles and enable action, to bring out the best in people to do the work that needs to be done? Let's be clear, it's not about just throwing out the business strategy and pretending, doing what we want to do all day. It's still about having purposeful action towards strategic business objectives, but rather than it being about command and control and based on, I don't expect you to do your job well. Absolute coaching style of leadership comes from a place of, I understand that you have the capacity, and how is it that I can draw that out of you? Now, if that whole layer of middle management, and we're making very broad generalizations here, but I think that's okay, turned from being, as you say, people who were there to crack the whip to people who were there to follow the energy and fan the flames, that's a business model that could transform both our experience of work and what comes out the other side of it too, in terms of products and services and innovation and creativity.
Now, that is what I would call an amazing pivot.
It is, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And it will be very interesting to see if we are able, if leadership is able to make that transition. And that's one of the pieces in the book, is how is it that we let go of models around what it means to lead well, that are not serving us, haven't served us for a very, very long time. But there's a void. We haven't got anything else to fill it with yet. And it's kind of, we're having to build the bridges, we're walking on it. And that's what COVID has very much forced on us. But it may be that we want to retreat into something far more safe, which is known, but not actually very helpful. And really, it's not an either or, it's an and. Certainly what I'm hearing from leaders and organizations is that when COVID first hit, and we did have that first kind of, we had to mobilize everyone to change their working environment and their working processes. Command and control was what teams wanted. They just wanted clarity. Where are we going? What are we doing? How is it happening? But then as things have ebbed and flowed and people have kind of got to a level of more comfort around different working environments and processes, there's a need for more autonomy so that we can engage more, this fanning the flames, finding the energy. How is it that people want to work? How is it that we can co-create how work looks in this new environment now that we know we have to be here? And it's not just going to be a couple of weeks or even a couple of months now. And so now it's like, okay, now we need to move away from that command and control style leadership, much more into this, what I call an invite and inquire. So how is it we can invite people into the conversation and lead with questions? And so, it's not just a simple black and white answer. And again, this is about expanding options, and really being able to meet the leadership need with the right type of leadership, whether that's command and control, invite and inquire, coaching style. So it's about us broadening the repertoire.
I really like that, invite and inquire, because you literally inviting an enabling environment, and an environment in which leadership and people who work in that organization can thrive. Paige, where can people find your book? How can they connect with you?
So my book is at Amazon.com. And it's available in paperback, in ebook, and in audiobook form at Amazon. And to connect with me, you can go to my website at www.drpaigewilliams.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn as well. So I'd love for you to connect with me there too.
I think that is awesome, Paige. Thank you so much. It was great hearing from you today, and also being able to share your book with our audience. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me on the show. And I feel honored that it's the 100th episode, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. I want to say a huge big thank you to our audience who's joined us live today. And if you want to know if we go live in future, please go ahead and like our Facebook page so you can get a notification. And on YouTube, please click the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you want to be a guest, reach out to us on the email contact@blivemedia.com. You're watching the Writers' Corner live show, our 100th episode with Bridgetti.Live and our special guest for today, Dr. Paige Williams. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.